Okay. Most appreciative. You can start from where you left off. Thank
All
you,
right.
Emma. I appreciate that.
Um, so framing why we're here and why these things matter, there's the issue of perpetual punishment, um, which is something that we talk about a lot in this work and that I'm sure everyone on the call is familiar with. Over 70 million Americans have a criminal record, and criminal records prevent people from accessing pretty much everything in life, from jobs and housing to I even worked with someone for years that had an old felony conviction that couldn't get burial insurance, so that if he died, his family wouldn't have to worry about the cost of a funeral. That was denied because of having a felony record. It is so pervasive and so all-encompassing in people's lives that it's kind of hard to imagine if you don't have one. And if you do have one, you completely understand it, and are kind of hitting roadblocks constantly at every turn. So getting your record sealed, vacated, or expunged makes a huge difference for you, the person with the record, but also for your family and your community, because you can really start to participate in society again.
So I just have a quick question before you move into that, because that example you used is rather daunting. Okay.
Mhm.
You couldn't buy burial insurance.
Yeah.
To what impact, just so that we can take it from here. It's crazy, first of all.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. But in looking at that, I don't even, I don't know. Okay, I apologize. Resume. It just threw me off so much shocking. That's very shocking.
Yeah. It
Very
is.
shocking.
I agree. I
Okay,
agree.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Emma. And I
No.
apologize to all others that they just needed a pause there to just to process
Yeah.
how pervasive. Okay, thank you, Emma. I'm sorry. That hurt me.
Yeah. I understand. And that's why we're here, right?
Mm,
So when we talk about record clearance, there are two kind of big issues that come into play. It's a racial justice issue. Most of the people that are arrested in New York and incarcerated are Black or Latinx. And also people with conviction records, even if they have identical records, if one of them is white and if one of them is not white, the white person is much more likely to get the job or get paid better than people with the exact same record that are people of color. So it's definitely a racial justice issue when we're talking about record clearance. It's also an economic justice issue. People who have been to prison lose almost $500,000 over their lifetime in earnings. What that means is that people are underpaid because of their record, so they are stuck in jobs that they're overqualified, that they're underqualified for. They should be doing other things, but they can't get those jobs. So they're just kind of stuck and they're under earning. And that's a lot of money over the course of somebody's life. So it's, these two issues are kind of why I think these things are important for society, not just for one or two people, but for everybody. It's kind of, these are bigger picture problems. All right, so automatic expungement in New York. I briefly mentioned that I worked on the laws that the marijuana laws in New York. The first one was actually this like mini version of marijuana legalization in Albany. The legislature got scared. I know I'm talking to people that know all of this, but just in case someone doesn't, Albany didn't feel ready to pass the full MRTA, but they did feel ready to pass the expungement part for a certain number of convictions. So what they did is they passed what they call decrim. That was in 2019. Over 200,000 records were automatically expunged as a result of that law being passed. Then in 2021, they actually added to under the same law, they added the repeal of the walking while trans ban, which was a really unjust law that allowed the police to target and harass trans people, especially like in New York and in New York City and in other big cities in the state. So they repealed that law and automatically sealed. Um, over 200,000 convictions for loitering for the purposes of prostitution, which is what that law was called. Um, then in 2021, they finally passed the MRTA, which was the big picture. That's what I think everybody here knows about. It was legalization, at least some things were legalized. It was the licensing, it was the supposedly community reinvestment, although I think we all have opinions about how much that's working. The big legalization bill that made more convictions automatically expungible. And another 250,000 convictions were automatically expunged after that. So we ended up with close to 700,000 convictions that were automatically expunged um, for low-level offenses in a few years in New York, which was a huge difference. And I have a chart that we'll talk about. But if you have one of those convictions, it should have a 16050 seal on it and it should not be showing up. There's nothing you need to do. We'll talk about it a little more. Um, so, like I said, automatic expungement means that it's automatic. You don't need a lawyer. There's nothing you need to do to get your record expunged. It's just, do you have a conviction for one of these offenses? If you do, then the state was supposed to do just through computer programming, make it so that those convictions are expunged and don't show up anymore. And that should be it. You just need to know if you had one of those or not.
Pardon my manners, do you recommend that people check and make sure? Because I mean, with modern technology, or sometimes there's glitches and they might have just missed somebody who should have been in that sweep.
Yeah, I do recommend, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I recommend that people know what's on their record and really have an understanding, especially we'll talk briefly about some of the other sealing laws. It's important to know what's on your record and have a copy of your rap sheet so that you know how to answer questions on job applications. And the only way you know that is if you know what is or is not going to be showing up. There are also a lot of mistakes on people's rap sheets. So not just this kind of mistake, like something that wasn't expunged properly, but like something that's showing up like an open case, but it's actually not an open case, or the wrong conviction showing up, the wrong. There's so many different mistakes. Most rap sheets have them, and if you get those fixed up, it actually really helps for jobs and other things. Um, so automatic expungement, as I said, it's specific convictions. So the old penal law, the old criminal offenses were Penal Law 221. That was the old marijuana laws. The new cannabis laws under the MRTA are Penal Law 220. So there's like a mix of some of the old ones and the new ones that are eligible for automatic expungement. Um, but it's just the things that are on this list. These convictions are eligible. And I see there should be 220 in the middle there. It should be 22006, not 2206. Sorry, I'll fix that before it goes online. There are no restrictions on eligibility. So if you have 20 convictions, it doesn't matter as long as you have one of these, it will be automatically expunged. The way it works is that the court is supposed to find all of those cases. And then they're supposed to tell DCJS, the Division of Criminal Justice Services, that the cases are expunged. DCJS is where rap sheets come from. So the court is supposed to seal it, and then they're supposed to tell the agency that makes rap sheets that the case was sealed as well. And then everything from the court is supposed to be marked as expunged. And they're supposed to tell police and prosecutors that the records are expunged as well. They say that they did all of this as of March 31st, 2023, which was their deadline. But again, you should check just to make sure. So the best ways to check if your record is properly expunged are you can actually go to the court yourself and request a certificate of disposition for your case if you know what your case is. You can also get a fingerprint-based rap sheet. Right now, there isn't a better way to do that because when we look at it in our system, if it was properly expunged, it doesn't show up. Um, which I guess is good, but like that could mean that we're just looking it up wrong, you know? So it's much better to just get one of these ways. Um, I'd say ideally your rap sheet if you can, because then you can check for errors and things too. Expungement means that your case is vacated, dismissed, and deemed a nullity. So, if you have a case, if you go to court and you have a case that's dismissed, um, and you end up with no conviction at all, the same the same thing is applied. It's treated the same way as an expunged case. It also shouldn't show up. So it's not a conviction. If you're asked about if you have a conviction on a job application and you only record is for one of these expunged cases, you can answer no. It shouldn't show up in a background check for any employment, housing, ACS. The only place that it will show up, and this is kind of an exception in New York for pretty much every kind of record clearance, is when you're applying for a gun license or for a job as a peace or police officer. All right, so there are a few questions with automatic expungement and how it actually played out. Um, One of the biggest ones is that the Office of Court Administration is refusing to actually write expunged on the certificates of disposition. They're writing sealed. It's they're saying because it's this being treated the same way as a case that was outright dismissed and then sealed under the same statute, that it's actually sealed and not expunged. Um, but of course, the law says it's expunged, but they won't write it. So we're in a fight with OCA. It actually does make a difference. One of the biggest places it makes a difference is with the DMV. So the DMV, if you have an old record and your case gets sealed, the DMV will not take it off of your driving abstract, which people use for jobs. If your case says expunged, they will take it off of your driving abstract. So right now, the DMV is refusing to take these cases off of people's driving abstracts because they don't say expunged on the certificate of disposition. So if you're applying for like you want to be an Uber driver or something and it still says sealed, that may still show up on your driving abstract. And I mean it's marijuana, but it's still a drug charge and it's still potentially problematic if you want to get that job. Um, so we are working to fix it, and hopefully we can um, either convince OCA or get the legislature to convince OCA to actually write expunged on these certificates. Another place where it was supposed to be automatically expunged, but it didn't happen, was 22003 and 22006. Now, those are the convictions for drug possession, the felony and misdemeanor. So if you possessed cocaine, you possessed heroin, you possessed concentrated cannabis, it's those offenses. Um, there isn't a code in the court system to say what type of offense you possessed. So the court said, listen, we're not pulling up every single drug conviction in New York State's history to look at it and figure out if it says concentrated cannabis. Like, we're just not doing it. It would be millions and millions of cases. Um, so they just didn't do it. So if you do have a conviction for one of these offenses and it was for concentrated cannabis and you have some way to show that that's what it was for, like we can get the arrest report or the criminal court complaint, something to show what it was for, that it was for that, then we actually can file a pretty simple motion with the court to say, you missed this, it should have been expunged, and they'll do it. We've actually done that. We have done that for one person so far. Unfortunately, a lot of these records are really old, and the court files don't have that much information, or they've been destroyed. So sometimes it's hard to actually figure out how to prove what the substance was for an old case. Question. You're on mute.
Okay, got you. So my quick question on that is have you found, or I know that you have only done one where you were able to but the impression that you have with this is that if the record is so old or it's not something that the verbal challenge is acceptable enough in order to assist in having it expunged from the when it comes to the concentrated cannabis. I mean, because you were saying that they group all of these other drugs underneath the same umbrella. And so now
Right.
you have to prove that it was the concentrated cannabis. And
Yeah.
because some of the records are old or rickety or gone, what would you suggest folks could possibly do if they find themselves in that situation in order to justify or prove their, you know,
Yeah. I mean, I think try to find any kind of a record. So usually there's something, if you keep digging, there's something in the court file. There's the police might have a record, the DA might have something that they wrote down, but I'd say just keep digging. Um, but we'll also talk about it's not as good. Expungement is kind of the best thing that can happen. But very often, if we can't get the record actually expunged, we might be able to get it sealed in a different way. Um, and we can always kind of work on that and do that in the meantime while we try to find those records so that you don't have something hanging around and showing up for, as many purposes. Um, Another issue I already said, there's no free and simple way to confirm that your record was actually properly expunged. So you really do need to get a copy of your record to verify for yourself. Um, that's frustrating, but it also is because the state is trying to protect people's information. So they say they don't want to send out letters to people's last known addresses. Because what if you got arrested, you had a record from 20 years ago and your landlord didn't know, and then the court sends a record that says, like, congrats, you don't have a record anymore, but the landlord sees it, right? Um, so they said we can't do that. So there's like no other way to give the information out without potentially giving the information to people that shouldn't have had it in the first place. So it is a little tricky. So right now, getting your rap sheet is the best way. Um, there are other things, like if you got a disorderly conduct violation and the case started as a marijuana case, but then you took a plea to something else that isn't technically one of these offenses, um, even though it's obviously marijuana related, if you look at the case, that wouldn't have been automatically expunged because they really just did it based on the list of offenses and not on the circumstances. There is an option to actually have your court record destroyed in the MRTA, in the expungement part. Um, that means that you could actually say, you can submit a letter to the court and say, like, burn the records, get rid of them. I want them shredded, whatever. Um, there are a lot of lawyers that I've talked to that are really nervous about people actually doing that. Um, because if you're in immigration proceedings or there's an ACS case or different things come up, very often they ask for you to prove what happened by getting a copy of your record. And if you can't get a copy of your record, it can actually be worse than if you get a copy of it to show it was expunged. So I always recommend that people speak with a lawyer and really think about whether that is a worthwhile thing to do or not. There are reasons why someone might still need a lawyer if they have an old marijuana conviction. One, if you're not a US citizen and you're concerned about immigration consequences, the expungement isn't going to help for those purposes. Immigration has said if it's automatic, it doesn't count as like a real overturned case. So you need to actually file a separate motion with an immigration attorney to try to have that case um, overturned or to not be an issue for immigration purposes. Um, if you have a conviction that's not eligible for automatic expungement, you can apply to vacate that conviction or get your sentence reduced. And we'll talk about that. That's something that's coming up. if you're thinking about physically destroying the records, and if you're looking to seal for something that's not eligible um, for the automatic expungement. So there are other things that aren't marijuana cases, but you might still want to talk to someone about getting those sealed. Or you're dealing with other kind of quote collateral consequences of the conviction. There are employment lawyers and other people that might be able to help. Um, as I said, I kept this in here. I did this training. This is actually like a training that I started to do for a bunch of lawyers, but I figured everyone on this call was knowledgeable enough about cannabis that we could do kind of a lawyer training. So that's why this is a practice tip. Um, so expungement still, there's no completely getting rid of your record in New York, especially with kind of the electronic age that we're in. There is always some record of it somewhere. This is the closest you can get to getting rid of your record. But you really do need, if you're an immigrant, to speak with an attorney about what that means. Um, and also to be careful about what it means when applying for jobs or housing or other opportunities, and to understand what you can say or not say. All right, so the other thing that I talked about, any questions before I talk about the next type of record clearance?
No, I've been happily interrupting you as you've been going along.
I
I
like
don't
it.
see anything in the chat, so
Yeah,
much
no,
love. Thank you for
I
asking.
like the interruptions. I don't like just listening to my own voice.
Okay,
Yeah.
coming up.
So 44046 is something else that was in the MRTA. It's for convictions that weren't eligible for automatic expungement. Um, you may be able to vacate your conviction or have it reduced to a lower level sentence. So what happened with the MRTA is that some things were just legalized and they weren't crimes anymore at all. Those things, if they're not crimes anymore under the law, then those old convictions got expunged because they're saying those never should have been crimes, basically. Then there were a bunch of things that got reduced, like the level of crime got reduced. It's anything that's there is one crime that stayed the same, which is possession of over 100 pounds of cannabis. That stayed the same level. Everything else is a lower level offense. So anything else, if you have a conviction for that and it wasn't expunged, is a lower level offense now under the new law. And a lot of those things are actually misdemeanors now when they used to be felonies, which is a big deal and a big difference. So it's definitely worth looking into if you have one of those old records. Um, Getting your conviction vacated, basically the exact same. If you're successful, the difference is the process. Like you have to apply to do it. But once it actually happens, there's basically no difference in terms of how your record shows up than getting your record expunged. Um, so as I said, there's basically no difference. All of these things are kind of the same: expungement, vacature, dismissal. They all sound different. They all seem really complicated. Um, Generally speaking, it doesn't matter unless you're an immigrant. And then automatic expungement versus application-based vacature are actually a huge difference. So for most people, it doesn't matter, but for some people, it actually is important to speak with a lawyer about what the differences are. All right. So if you're going to apply, to vacate your conviction under 44046. These are the reasons why you would be able to do that. You have a felony conviction that is now a misdemeanor under the law. Um, you have a conviction for a sale. This is complicated. It is now, it used to be that you could sell, quote, sell marijuana under the law in New York without getting money for it. And now you have to get, or anything, like without compensation is just money or like getting something in return. It was still a sale, even though you didn't get anything. And now that's not the law because that doesn't make any sense. Um, but that's what the law was. So if you have a conviction where you were convicted of selling marijuana, but there was nothing that you got for it, there was no compensation, then that's not a crime anymore. And then you could apply to vacate your conviction. And you would need, like, you'd need to look at your record and know about that, or a lawyer would need to sit down with you and talk about what actually happened with the case. Um, you might also have something where some of your charges were expunged because they were lower level offenses, but then you have like more kind of more serious offenses that were there. Um, and you might want to get your sentence reduced or vacated for those ones that are still there. Um, and then there's this other really specific one, which is you have a conviction for sale. Penal Law 221.45 is an old marijuana sale conviction. And the sale was for under 3 ounces. So it's now only a violation and not a crime to sell anything that is under 3 ounces. But it used to be a crime. The MRTA created these 440 provisions. Like I said, it applies to almost all marijuana convictions except for the over 100-pound sale conviction. But everything else, you've either got automatic expungement or you've got these offenses here on this list um, that are eligible for to have your conviction vacated or reduced to the new lower level offense. Um, and you don't need to do this if you have one of the convictions that was already automatically expunged, because it already shouldn't be showing up. The way to do this, and I know we're not gonna kind of memorize this now, but it's more just because this is being recorded, so people have this information, can look back at it later. First, you need to make sure you're eligible, which means getting a copy of your record and knowing what's on there. OCA created an application that you can use if you want to file on your own, or you can file a motion with the court as well. Um, the it's possible that the prosecutor, the DA, will actually oppose. And in that case, there would be a hearing. I highly recommend that if you file something and the DA is opposing, that you ask to have a lawyer to help you with the hearing. Um, However, there's no right to counsel in the law, so getting a lawyer to take on the case is sometimes difficult. So, um, because they're not going to get paid. So, like, we at the Legal Aid Society do these cases because it's just kind of part of our broader record clearance work. But organizations or individual attorneys that do stuff for money, which is, most lawyers, not us, but most other lawyers, um, uh, don't do things if they don't get paid for them. So, uh, but it's still good. You can still ask. Sometimes I've heard of people saying that they actually want an attorney assigned if there's a hearing scheduled and the court has actually done it. And if the court assigns an attorney in court, then that person, I think, gets paid, and you have a lawyer that's getting paid. Um, you have to argue if you want your conviction vacated, you have to argue that you're suffering severe or ongoing consequences to having the conviction or to the sentence. I believe that having a felony on your record when you could have a misdemeanor or have no record is a severe or ongoing consequence because of the endless perpetual punishment of having a record, especially a felony record. Just so you know, there is a mistake in the law that may be fixed, but right now, what I said about the severe ongoing consequences, you always have to talk about that if you want any kind of relief under this law. That's not how the law was supposed to work out. There's just a typo, a very small typo that has a very big difference in people's lives. It's very frustrating. We're working to fix the typo. I'm meeting with people in Albany every couple months to remind them that it exists. But for now, you have to argue the consequences are significant enough that the court should reduce or vacate your record. Just so you know, the judge is allowed to consider the circumstances of the offense, not just the conviction. So if you were arrested for, possessing much more than you were convicted of or selling much more than you were convicted of, the judge is allowed to look at that. As I said, uh, there is no right to counsel in the law, so it's you should try to find a lawyer if you can, but you may not be able to, and that can make things complicated. And then severe ongoing consequences, like what does that mean? Like I said, having a felony record is kind of all encompassing. The immigration consequences, obviously, of a felony drug conviction are really serious. They're also, being denied jobs, housing, uh, getting into colleges, licenses. I mean, there are so many different things. You just have to be able to talk about what those are. All right. We talked about this already. How do I know what's on my record? The best way to figure that out is to get a copy of your rap sheet. The rap sheet is the fingerprint-based record. So you have to get a DCJS, as I said, has it. They only have New York State records. They don't report out of state or federal convictions. Um, if you have a record out of state, or if you have a federal conviction history, or federal arrest history, then you should also get a copy of your FBI rap sheet, and stuff will show up there as well. There
Question.
are two
Where,
types. Sorry.
question. I'm sorry. Where do you
Mhm.
go to get the information, or what department would you go to specifically for that in order to
To get your rap sheet.
exactly?
I think I have a slide about that in here.
Okay, cool
If I
beans.
don't, if I don't, I'll explain it. Yeah.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, of course. So there are two types of rap sheets. There's the unsuppressed rap sheets. That means the rap sheet that shows everything, even sealed stuff, and youthful offender adjudications, which are also sealed. Um, that's like the rap sheet that you should only get for yourself to look at everything and make sure cases have it says sealed and like all of that stuff. You should never give that to an employer or somebody that's asking for a copy of your rap sheet. And it's actually now illegal in New York for employers to ask you to get a copy of your rap sheet to give them, but people still do it. So if you are going to do that for an employer, get a suppressed rap sheet if you must. The suppressed rap sheet should not show any sealed or like other suppressed information. Um, that's what should show up like on a background check if it's a fingerprint based background check. Okay, there are a few different ways to get a copy of your rap sheet. If you're currently incarcerated, you can get a rap sheet for free. You have to be incarcerated for 45 days or more. I believe that they are still letting people do this in downstate and upstate. If people aren't able to get their free rap sheets while they're incarcerated, I'd like to know about it because that's a big problem. Um, there also are legal services organizations like the Legal Aid Society in New York City, but also there are a number in like the capital region and around the state. They can help people, they can fingerprint people and help people get a copy of their rap sheet using a fee waiver. You're only eligible for a fee waiver if you're below 135% of the poverty level, which is a very low number. So some people that um, like are struggling financially still aren't eligible for the fee waiver because it's such a low number. But the way that would work is like, so when we help people get a copy of their rap sheet, they come in to our office or we meet them at a community event and we actually fingerprint them with like uh, an ink pad and send the fingerprint card and some forms into Albany and ask them to send us back a copy of the rap sheet. And then the other way to do it is through a private vendor called Identigo. Um, you have to pay a processing fee to that vendor, and you can sign up online for an appointment to get your fingerprints taken and get a copy of your rap sheet. That's the fastest way to do it, but it's not free because you have to pay a processing fee to the vendor. If you want to get your FBI rap sheet, you need a fingerprint card. Um, sometimes, so our office helps people get their FBI fingerprint cards. I actually think sometimes people get fingerprint cards done at police stations. I never like to suggest that people do that, but that that is the thing that some people are comfortable doing, because the police will do the fingerprinting there. There's a form that you have to fill out, and then there's a fee that you have to pay. And it can all be sent to this place in West Virginia. Uh-huh.
I just wanted to ask, what would be your concern with someone going to a police station in order to obtain that fingerprint card?
Oh, I just generally don't like to ever recommend that like people that have ever been involved with the criminal system interact with the police if we can avoid it. That's
No,
all. It's
agreed,
just in
agreed,
general. Yeah. It's
agreed.
not
But
specifically about fingerprinting. It's just why make somebody, I mean, I
open.
guess for two reasons. One, I don't really trust the police to not do something that would be harmful to someone when they go to the police station. And two, I find that when I have sent clients to police stations to like get copies of records or anything like that, it can be really triggering, because you know you're going and you're doing something and kind of reliving a really horrible prior experience in your life. You're doing that because you have a record and you've been arrested before, which is very often one of the worst things that's ever happened to you. Um, so asking people to put themselves in that kind of a triggering situation when there are other options, I just prefer the other options.
I
That's
appreciate
my,
your
yeah,
consideration.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't want to go into too much detail about understanding rap sheets, but these slides are here, just kind of for people to reference back to. Um, Rap sheets have arrest information, the information about what happened in the case, and then if you were incarcerated or under supervision, like on probation or parole, it will have some, but not all of the information, like not the full detail about what happened with that. Um, if you got a certificate of relief from disabilities, that information should also be on the rap sheet. But again, that's something that you can check when you get a copy. Errors on rap sheets, as I've said, are really, really common. There are cases that show up as still pending. There are cases that show up, but it has the wrong final disposition. Um, There are a bunch of laws in New York. The reason I say pending cases are not protected by the human rights law is because there are laws in New York that protect you from being discriminated against based on your conviction record. Those laws don't protect you based on your pending cases. So if a case is showing up as pending, meaning it's still looking like an open case, you're not protected with an employer the way you are if the case is actually a closed case. So it does make a big difference. Um, if you get a copy of your rap sheet, one of the great things about getting a copy of your rap sheet is that you can then submit error correction forms, which are, it's actually a form that comes with your rap sheet that you fill out and you say, here are the mistakes and here's the paperwork showing why it's a mistake. And you send that back to Albany, to the DCJS, and say, please fix this on my record. And that will hopefully actually get it fixed. How much? We got a little time. Um, so I can pause here. I was going to talk very briefly about other kinds of record clearance that aren't marijuana, but I'd like to know if people think that's helpful or if I should pause and answer questions. Yeah. You're muted again.
I thank you very much because I'm a ooh in the background, and I I didn't think you needed that narrative. Uh, um, what I would ask you to do is to, if you could, just surround that a little bit, because folks are from time to time engaged in a multitude of issues in which they look to resolve. And for those folks who are really looking to take advantage still of the card holding aspects of perhaps being, engaged in the industry in one way or the other, or expanding themselves or sharing this information with others, um, it goes sometimes beyond the marijuana aspects, if you will. And
Mhm.
so just to allow somebody just to take a look at the breadth of things and how they could resolve more so, if you will, in their lives in order to be able to move forward. I'd appreciate that myself if you could.
Okay. So I'll talk briefly about kind of what the different options are. So there's automatic record sealing in New York, which the expungement kind of falls into that category, and we'll talk about clean slate, which is very exciting and happening very soon. And then there's application based, which means you need to actually file something with the court. That's what the 44046 is. There are also other kinds of application based sealing. The two main ones are 16058 and 16059. 16058 is the Rockefeller drug sealing law. So it was passed years ago. It allows you, if you have a drug conviction and other convictions that were um, kind of resulting from drug use and being involved in drug use at the time of the convictions, and you can apply to have those sealed. It's difficult to get. You have to show that you did court-ordered drug treatment and that you successfully completed it. Um, but it is something that's available to people, and you can have like 4 or 5 convictions sealed under that. We don't do that one as much. It's just not as common. The one that our office does the most of, and most people around the state think of when they think of application-based record sealing, is 16059. That is for people that have up to 2 total convictions in their life that are more than 10 years old. And it can only be one felony, and it can't be a violent felony. Um, that's a really strong form of sealing. It went into law in 2017, so it's been around for 9 years now. And that's when I started the Case Closed Project in New York to try to help people get their records sealed under that. It's very, very meaningful for the people that are eligible, but there are tons and tons of people that have more than 2 convictions, or have one conviction that's a violent conviction, and they're not eligible. But for the people that are eligible, it's great, and people should do it if they can. This is just a little more information about 16059, so you have it written down. Um, so it's up to 2 convictions total. One felony conviction. It can't be a Class A felony, a violent felony, or a sex offense, and they have to be more than 10 years old, which means you can't have had any new convictions in the prior 10 years. The Rockefeller sealing law I briefly mentioned is the drug sealing one. There might be some people that are eligible for that, as well as the 44046, or maybe they have other drug convictions that aren't marijuana related. It's at least worth looking into if you were struggling with addiction and did a court mandated drug treatment program. It's possible you'd be eligible for that. Okay. For those people that aren't eligible for any of the other relief that we talked about, we have clean slate now, which is very, very exciting. I started working on clean slate in 2018. So basically, as soon as I realized the application-based sealing was going to be a problem, me and some other advocates started writing a law that would be automatic sealing. And we got clean slate passed a couple years ago. So it's hopefully going to be a big deal for people. Thank you. Clean slate will go into effect fully in November 2027. So that's less than a year and a half now, I think. We're getting there. When it goes into effect, millions of people are going to get their records sealed automatically. There's nothing you're going to have to do, which is very, very exciting. You'll be eligible if you meet the waiting period. You don't have any new convictions in that waiting period. You're not currently incarcerated or on probation or parole for the offense that you're looking to seal, and you don't have a sex offense or a Class A non-drug felony. So, like a Class A violent felony. Um, the waiting periods are, sorry, the waiting periods are 3 years for misdemeanors and 8 years for felonies. The time starts counting um, when you get out from prison, if you were incarcerated, or when you're sentenced if you were. All right, just very quickly on clean slate. Um, I didn't want to put too much information on in here, but I just want people to understand. Uh, so 16059 has like a limit. You can only have 2 total convictions in your life. Clean slate has no limit. So if you have 27 convictions, as long as they're 3 years for a misdemeanor, 8 years for a felony, and they're not one of the ineligible offenses, like you have 17 drug possession cases and 5 turnstile jumps, whatever, and they're from the 90s, all of those are going to be sealed automatically. There's nothing you need to do. All of that's going to be sealed. So people's records are going to go from having like little bits of things kind of popped around here and there when you look at a rap sheet to nothing, like literally nothing showing up anymore for a lot of jobs in housing. So it's going to be a really, really big change, I hope, for people in New York when it actually goes into effect. Um, any questions about clean slate? I could talk about clean slate for like a whole hour, but like that wasn't kind of what our goal is
One thing
today.
that I want to say
Yeah.
about it is that that is a tremendous relief for a whole lot of folks. I just want to ask, just ever so briefly, regarding the Rockefeller laws. I've had the unfortunate experience of working with some individuals who did like a 30, 35-year clip off of the Rockefeller laws. And
Mm,
so there wasn't the opportunity perhaps for rehab or things of this nature because it took you from here to there. There was no outs. You got to finish this sentence type of thing.
uh-huh.
So does that have any impact in them attempting to seal or whatever may have you because of the extent of time that it was done so that they didn't have the opportunity maybe for rehab or some of those other qualifying opportunities which does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So people that had like really long incarceratory sentences, and didn't do time or didn't do treatment, I mean, or court mandated treatment, uh, are probably not going to be eligible for that for the 16058. Some people actually, if they were incarcerated and they did KSAT, um, they actually are eligible. KSAT, for people that know, is CASAT is the abbreviation. People have also done a couple other like more intense drug treatment when they're actually upstate. And some of those the courts have found are enough for this kind of this kind of record sealing. But tons of the people that you're talking about are people that were pushing for clean slate because they are going to get their record sealed under clean slate. The length of your sentence doesn't matter as long as you've been out for 3 or 8 years and you're off of parole or probation for that case. So, uh, like if you've been out since 2000 and you've been off of parole since 2003, then like that case is getting sealed. It doesn't matter that you did 25 years before that. The length of the sentence doesn't matter. It's just how much time you've been out. So that's a big part of why we wanted Clean Slate to cover so many different cases. Because there are huge numbers of people that just weren't eligible for anything. And they've been out for years, decades even, and there is just nothing available to them. So this is hopefully, finally, there will be something.
Thank you.
Um, any other questions about the clean slate stuff?
I posted something in the chat if you could possibly respond to that.
Sure, let me see. Jessica asked, so if you have a felony conviction, you've been waiting for 8 years, but the 7 years comes up, you get a new misdemeanor. Does the time restart with the misdemeanor or the felony? I actually, me and some of the other advocates that worked on this disagree about what is actually going to happen with that. So I think that it should be the misdemeanor waiting period starts at 3 years because that's the new conviction that you're on, and the felony one is just kind of held on until the misdemeanor waiting period comes up. Some people think that actually everything restarts if you get any new conviction. So it would be 8 more years after the misdemeanor. Um, that is something we are hoping to know before November 2027. But we actually don't know. I'm hoping my answer is right because that seems more fair to me. But that doesn't mean that that's how the state is actually going to do it.
Wonderful. Thank you for speaking on that. When I heard that you were part of this presentation, I was like, I will ask her. She's got to know.
Yeah.
Because I've heard both answers and it's been
Yeah.
confusing to me. So that explains a lot. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, it's confusing to me. And like I'm one of I don't know, there were 6 of us. Now there are like 4 or 5 of us that are like lawyers that like helped write it and are like involved in educating people about it. And we disagree. And we've asked the Office of Court Administration, and they've given us 2 different answers. And they're the ones that are doing it. So like nobody seems to have any idea how that's going to work yet, but it's on my list to get them to just they got to answer the question. Um, this is why they had 3 years to do it because like it's um, they don't know what they're doing. They're figuring it out as they go. So hopefully in a year they will actually know what they're doing. um, all right. I just wanted people to know that like if you have records that are still hanging around and they're causing you issues, but you're not eligible for sealing or vacature or some kind of record relief, there are certificates of rehabilitation and certificates of good conduct. Those are papers that you get, you apply to either the court or to probation, depending on which thing you need. And they're papers that you get that essentially say you're rehabilitated and that you can give to an employer even if the record does show up. I know this sounds a little bit silly, but there are some employers that actually take them very seriously and some that don't care about them at all. But employment lawyers know which places those are actually really valuable for. And it definitely doesn't hurt. You know, it's never going to be make it worse than it was. So it's worth thinking about that. It is also the only way to restore your right to hold public office after you've had certain conviction records and restore your right to get a gun license after you've had certain convictions. So if those are things that are important to you, then you actually sealing isn't going to help with those things. What's going to help is getting a certificate of good conduct from the court or probation.
So how do you go about getting this? Where do you go, or where do you start, or where do you for the certificate? Is
Yeah.
that is
It's unfortunately pretty complicated. I have some information here in the presentation, but our office has a group of attorneys called the Worker Justice Project. The Worker Justice Project has a bunch of kind of helpful do-it-yourself information on their section of the website that's much more detailed than this. And you can do this on your own. You don't need a lawyer to do it. But I would recommend looking at their section of the website. You can start here with these slides, but then looking at their section of the website. Again, that's the Worker Justice Project at the Legal Aid Society, and they have step-by-step instructions about how to do it. This is just eligibility for certificates of relief. These are for if you have one felony and misdemeanors. If you have more than one felony, you need something else. Certificates of good conduct are basically for if you have 2 or more felony convictions. And there are different waiting periods depending on the level of conviction that you have. And you submit that to the Department of Corrections, to docs. When you're talking about forms evidence of rehabilitation, do this for certificates of good conduct and certificates of relief, but you also often need to do it for other application-based sealing. All of these things that I've listed here, employment experience, drug treatment programs, letters from community members or former employers, are all very, very helpful in telling the court kind of how you are, quote, rehabilitated. I will just say, I hate this because I think that so I have people do these things because I know that it's something that the court wants to see, is like somebody to show that they're, quote, a better person than they were before. But I personally take great offense to even having to show the court anything, because I think, first of all, a lot of people didn't do what they were convicted of, so they're innocent. They're not rehabilitated from anything. They were just caught up in an unjust carceral system, number one. And number two, even if you did do it, if you've been out of the system for 15 years, then like that's incredible. Like, you have a conviction record. How have you made your life work? How have you moved forward without getting caught back up in the criminal system? The system is stacked against you. So, like, just get rid of the records, seal the records. Just why are we doing this? That's not helpful information for application-based stuff. I just want people to understand, like, I don't think that's fair that they're asking these things of people, but they do. So just be aware that they may be required, and kind of think about how you want to present yourself. Again, you should just be able to say, I shouldn't have this on my record anymore, it's holding me back, or it should be automatic, like clean slate is, and then we should be able to all move forward with our lives. All right, I don't think I have enough time to talk about conviction records. There's some information in here about employment protections in New York. So uh, kind of what the rules are when you're applying for a job and you have a conviction record. There are just some slides in here that you can look through, that should answer kind of some of the questions about when things show up and when employers can or cannot consider your convictions. And these are just, there's the human rights law, there's Article 23A, which is another law that protects you. And that's it. This is our project's information. If people have questions about record sealing, or but you have to live in New York City if you want help getting your record sealed, for us to help you. Otherwise, there are people in other parts of the state. You can email our intake. It's caseclosed@legal-aid.org. This is our phone number. We've also got a lot of information on our website.
I just have to tell you that this, to me, was invaluable, just based on the information it could provide to our members, but also for our members to provide to their community members and interested individuals who have been affected adversely from, drug laws in America, in New York State. As I'm telling everyone else, we will be having a job fair here in the Capital Region the 11th of August, and I hope that this information, this presentation, you can pass along and allow folks to understand that there is life after the madness. And Emma provided an incredible amount of information that takes some of the stress away and allows you to look moving forward into your life. And Emma, I have to say, you and your colleagues have done an incredible job on looking out for human beings who have just been disenfranchised or lost for a moment in their lives, or, hooked and crooked into something that was something that would have an adverse effect on their lives that shouldn't. Youth being it, or young and dumb, or whatever it is. And I really do believe that the work that you have put in with you and your colleagues, and the things that we have coming along to look forward to for our citizens, is invaluable. And so for that, I just bravo. You guys have been hustling, and it looks great. And I just want to read you some quick comments before we let you go. Oh, great presentation, and thank you so much. Awesome presentation and great information. Thank you. And
Thank you.
again, for those, we will have this up on the BCI YouTube page where you can go back and review. And Emma, I just really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Definitely have people reach out if they have questions about record sealing. If people have questions, if they have like community groups that they want to learn about Clean Slate more generally, the Clean Slate Coalition is still doing, I believe, monthly meetings. And we also have a form that you can fill out on our Clean Slate website, which is cleanslateny.org, to ask for somebody to come and speak at a community event about Clean Slate and how that's going to impact people too.
Cool beans. We'll make sure that we put it out there and share this resource. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all for showing up. And you can view again this presentation on BCI's YouTube page, and we'll make sure that we provide the link in an email. Much love and blessings, everybody. Beat the heat and have a very safe and pleasant holiday. Thank you.
Bye.